Everyone, and today we will talk about Bayesian inferencing and its couple of example of it for intelligent user interface development. And myself, Pradipta Vishwas, assistant professor in Indian Institute of Science. So, in the last lecture, we talked about state space search, and we talked about uninformed and informed search. So, in the informed search, we used the term estimation, that we were not sure about a parameter. So, we estimated that parameter from another variable. So, in that particular case, we were estimating from the straight line distance. So, when we are talking about estimation, it means that we are not certain about the exact value, and there is some sort of uncertainty. So in the star search algorithm, we looked at that how we can tackle this uncertainty through a function, and we look at some properties of the function. So today we will look at another popular way of addressing uncertainty, and we will talk about Bayes rule, and then we will look at Bayes inferencing and the naive Bayes model, which are one of the most popular technique used in both artificial intelligence and human computer interaction. So why is uncertainty? So there are many factors. For example, theoretical ignorance, that imperfect domain knowledge. So if we, for example, look at the present pandemic situation, that every day some new information is coming up, and no one has a perfect model that what exactly is happening. And similar is practical ignorance or imprecise case data. So probably we can look at the example of climate change or the historical climate record, that when we are looking at a weather recording, say from 50 or 70 years before, we cannot be fully certain about the accuracy of the data or the accuracy of the technology. And that goes for many other calculation, even in the present case, where we cannot accurately measure certain case data. And then, well, laziness, that means incomplete data. So if say we are collecting data through a survey, many times it's happened that people are not filling up all the columns, or for some reason I cannot collect all data from everyone. So that uh, gives me say a set of data in which some cells or some columns or rows are not complete. So all these contribute to uncertainty, and when there is uncertainty, we need some mathematical way by which we can predict the future or predict the missing value, and so on. Now, it's not always be the case that that it is someone our fault with the data collection, that I do not know, or he or she didn't answer. It many time it also happens that exact methods are not actually known. So say for example, we are trying to land a rover on the lunar surface. So I do not or cannot make exact calculation of the curvature or the weather pattern on moon or any planetary object. And many times the exact methods are impractical to employ. Say for example, lack of data. So again, we can look back at the pandemic situation, that uh, the data is not accurate, adequate in all geographical places, and the problems with collecting data. So many times, say if we say again, we look at the astronomical example, that we cannot collect accurate data in a planetary surface, or even if we look at our everyday life, that say I am trying to develop a model for predicting the rain for the next monsoon, but again I may not have access to all historical data, or sometimes when we try to implement software, we also have a similar problem with the format of data. And that leads to the third point, that difficulties with processing data. That means that I may have data, but some data may be in non-electronic form, some data may be in the electronic form, some data is maybe based on the intuition of experts. So coding all this data makes it difficult to process this data electronically. So all these contribute to uncertainty. And what is the nature of the inexact methods? The inexact methods, they give approximate answers. That means answers with variable precision. And so what we do, we try to model uncertainty to get efficient and effective in the exact method. That means we take it granted that I cannot get accurate result. So I try to know that what is the probability that my data will be accurate with a certain degree. So later in a lecture, we will also talk about this exact name of this probability, like type 1 probability, type 2, a type 1 error, type 2 error, and so. So first we will look at the very basic probabilistic model. So we'll talk about variables. What is variables? That is, it's a entity whose value varies. And mostly we'll talk about three types of variables: Boolean, discrete, and continuous. In upcoming example, mostly we'll talk about Boolean variables. That means the variable has only two values, true or false. Then in the statistical learning or Bayesian inferencing section, we will also talk about discrete variables, in which case the variable can take a set of discrete values. Say, for example, I am procuring grocery from one of three sources. So my grocery variable has three discrete value. And finally, in many real life situation, actually we talk about continuous variables. Say, for example, velocity of a car, or the, say, acoustic signal generated by speech. Those are continuous variable. But it is interesting that if we can understand any modeling technique or the uncertainty method for any one variable, it's pretty easy to employ it for the Boolean or discrete case. Or more specifically, here in the upcoming example, we will use the summation symbol. And for discrete variables or Boolean variables, for continuous variable, only instead of the summation symbol, we have to use the integration sign. Next, we will talk about conditional probability, and we'll expect that everybody is familiar. So even we will have a few slides on explaining conditional probability. So say, for example, here is the example that we are tossing a fair coin. The first three outcomes are head incidentally. So the conditional probability is that given we know a set of prior events, what will be the outcome of all the next tosses. So for and later we will look at an example that, say, I have a bag of uh, candies, and I do not know the exact composition of candies. So if I take three candies and orders all are sour, what is the probability that the next candy will be sweet or sour based on the prior events? So in terms of conditional probability, we will use these two symbols. One is, you can see that one is like this triangle. So this is the symbol for joint probability. That means what is the probability here? Say A and B, we can either describe them as a variable or a probability of an event. So if we consider them as probability of event, what is the probability of both A and B happening? And this product rule says that A and this straight vertical straight line is called bar. A bar B means that what is the probability of A given B. That means here, say, I am like the previous example, that my prior event as I picked up three sour candies. So what is the probability of the fourth candy being salty, sour, or sweet? Or another popular example we can give, that, say, for example, that someone has fever and someone also have cough. So what is the probability that that person may be COVID positive? Okay, so we can think it in terms of cause and symptom. So the product rule says that P joint probability of A and B is equal to A bar B into B, and similarly just the opposite, B bar A into A. So from this we can equate P A bar B into B equal to P B bar A into A, and then we can say that P A bar B, that means probability of A given B, equal to this particular equation. And for the rest part of the lecture, we will exploit different version of this equation, which is known as Bayes rule. So what is it mean Bayes rule physically, or in terms if we forget for a time being A, B, all these symbols? That Bayes rule, it relates prior knowledge prior to present experiment or present measurement or present event for taking present inference. So intuition is before we observe the data, the parameters are described by a prior, which is typically very broad. Let's say, for example, the probability of people having fever or the probability. Once we observe the data, we can make use of base formula to find posterior. Since now we can utilize some more facts in the form of evidence, the posterior is narrower than prior. So for example, say I have the probability that how many people have fever, how many people have cough. I also have the probability that how many people are COVID positive, what is the percentage of people. Now, with these two prior knowledge, if I now encounter a person who has either fever or cough or both, can I improve my accuracy on predicting that whether the person is COVID positive or not? So here, say Y is the cause and X is the evidence or symptom. So we are, instead of AB, we are just using a different set of variable. So the probability of, say, COVID positive given someone has fever is the probability of the fever given someone has COVID positive. So that probability we can find from historical example, that how many COVID patients had fever, and multiply the probability of people in the particular region who are COVID positive divided by the probability of people having fever. And if we also want to consider, say, with fever, the another evidence, a cough, so we can extend the formula like this: that what is the probability that someone has both fever and cough? It's like this. And in the after a few slides, we will look into this issue on tackling multiple evidence in more detail. And we will see that how this becomes one of the bottleneck or one of the main problem of using the Bayes rule as it is. So we will look at some solution that how we can tackle multiple evidence. So for the time being, please make sure that we understand what is posterior probability and what is prior probability. Moving ahead. So as we are telling, what is the problem with Bayes rule? That when there are many causes and evidences, the calculation becomes exponential. So again, remember that like in the last lecture, we are also talking, when we are talking about the space complexity of uh, BFS or A-star search, or the time complexity of BFS and uh, A-star search, that exponential is bad because it's increased very quickly. So here, what is exponential? So when we have multiple causes, that I want to know that whether someone has COVID or someone has just common cold, and when there are multiple evidences like fever, nausea, um, cough, then if we want to use the Bayes rule as it is, then if there are m causes and n evidence, it can be proved that we need mn to the power k plus m plus n to the power k probabilities. Okay, where k is the total number of possible causes. And again, it gives the problem that we cannot calculate so many probabilities. Even with machine also, it we cannot store, or it is impractical to calculate so many variables. So we look at some way so that we can reduce the number of variables. So this is one technique which is called independent evidence assumption. Say for example, someone, I want to know the probability of COVID, and someone has fever, and say for example, he also have myopia. So now from the domain knowledge, I know that myopia doesn't have any effect on COVID, or COVID doesn't have effect in myopia. So I can make a independent evidence assumption that whatever may be the probability of y1 given both y2 and y3 is equal to the probability of y1 given y2, and y1 doesn't depend on y3. Now, please remember that this is an assumption. That means as a experimenter or as a data scientist, I am making this assumption. This may not be true, but still we do this assumption to get to be able to calculate a probability value. And many times these assumptions are good enough, or they do not degrade the quality of the prediction too much. And in some upcoming example, we'll see that how we can actually implement such independent evidence assumption. So the way we implement independence evidence assumption is known as belief network or Bayesian network. It has multiple names. So this is again a graphical structure where we have a set of nodes, just like this last time. Remember that we have a set of nodes which we are terming at states, and then we have a set of um, edges which we are terming at operators. So in this case, my set of nodes will indicate a random variable. So one node for one random variable, and the links will be directed. That means they will have an arrow on it, and it's by definition it's a directed acyclic graph, so there won't be any cycle in it. And how we will construct it, that we will draw an arrow from the cause to effect. That means the direction arrow of the direction will be that from the parents towards the son, and the parent is the cause and son is the result. So the conditional distributions are represented by conditional probability tables. So for discrete variables, we use table. We'll see in the next slide. And if the variables is continuous, instead of table, we will just have a probability distribution. Otherwise, the calculation will remain more or less same. So again, this is another same iteration of the same fact, that if I have n binary nodes and they are all fully connected, we have to calculate 2 to the power n minus 1 independent numbers. While if we can connect them like this, so we have only have to calculate 2 to the power 3 into n number of variables. So even if you do not want to go into the details of the calculation, you can just consider that the main reason of constructing belief networks or Bayesian network is to reduce the number of variables that we need to calculate to make any estimation. So let us start with a very basic example. And this is technically is not a Bayesian network because we have only two variables. And here A is the cause and B is the effect. So if you search for Bayes rule examples in Google, you will also find this example and many such examples. So let us look at the example. Say 1% of people have a certain genetic defect that I know, and 90% of tests for the gene detect the defect. Okay, so this is true positive. That means the test gives me positive result, and when the reality is also true. Now 9.6% of the tests are false positives. That means they will show you positive, but actually that is not true. If a person gets a positive test result, what are the odds they actually have the genetic defect? Right. So if the person I will say you can also think it like a COVID test, that if a person actually tested positive in the first COVID test, what is the probability that he actually has the disease? So here, when we are trying to use Bayes rule, the like in the last class I was telling that when we are applying a state space search algorithm in our problem, the main issue or main effort from us is how we construct the state space. And it is very similar here. When we are using a Bayesian inferencing, it's very important how we are defining the variables. So once we can define the variables properly, then the rest of the calculation is just multiplication and summation. And in later example, you will see that even you can do a lot of Bayesian calculation in just in Microsoft Excel by writing Excel formula, because those are only multiplication and summation. For continuous variable, of course, you have to write an integration package or you have to write software code. So here we are assigning A that chance of having the faulty gene that was given in the question as 1%. This also means that the probability of not having the gene, that means not A, here tilde means not, is 99%, and 1% of people have the faulty gene. And B is the probability of a positive test result. So now let us first, this is just a reiteration of the previous definitions of variable. So P A bar B is the probability of having the gene given a positive test result. P B bar A chance of a positive test result given that person actually has the gene, that was given in the question as 90%. So uh, in the previous slide, if you see, if I go back, that 90% of tests for the gene detect the defect. That means if the person having the faulty gene, that means A, then the test result B given A is 90%, right? And that means, and then it was also told that if the person doesn't have the faulty gene, then also I can get false positive, and that percentage is given at 9.6%, 0.96. So I know B bar A and B bar not A. Now we have to calculate P A bar B. So I know P B bar A if you look at the top formula. So that is 0.9 and PA is 0.1. And the denominator calculation is like that, that I have to sum it for all possible values. So I have to sum it for B bar A into PA plus B bar not A into P not A. So the first one is same as the numerator, B bar A, or B is positive given A is positive multiplied by A is positive plus B is positive given A is negative into A is negative. So that turns out to be 8.65%. So this is the answer of my question, that if the test result is positive, what is the probability that the person has this faulty gene? Now here you can make a few observations before we go into more uh, complicated calculations. First is that calculating the numerator is pretty straightforward and easy. Here P B bar A is given, P A is given, just one multiplication is enough. Calculating the denominator is rather difficult because we have to sum two numbers, and if you do not go through Bayesian inferencing before, you may find a bit lost here that how this calculation is calculated, and it is not wrong, because in latter example we will see that we may not need to calculate the denominator at all. Second thing, interesting thing is that there is a, see, B bar A, that means if the person have a faulty gene, there is a 90% chance that the person will generate a positive test result. But here P A bar B, that means given a positive test result, whether the person is having the faulty gene, is only 8.65%. So earlier PA was 1%. That means the probability that if you do not go to the any test, then what is the probability you have the faulty gene? That was 1%. Now you have a positive test result, which gives true positive in 90% cases, but still your probability, conditional probability is only 8.65%. So this is due to the fact because the gene is very rare, and in the numerator we are multiplying zero point 0.9 by 0.01. And this is again one drawback of the Bayesian statistics, that if there is a very rare event, even after a very convincing fact that the test result is positive, the probability doesn't increase that much. Okay. So later on, we will see in the example that we are sometimes more interested in comparative statistics than the absolute value. But for the time being, let us try to understand the calculation, that the main thing is defining the variable and assigning the value to the variable. And as I told, that this A, and A is the cause, that means faulty gene, B is the test result, and the faulty gene will cause the or dictate the result of the test. So the arrow is going from A towards B. This is technically not a Bayesian network because we have only two variables, but in reality we have slightly more complicated network. So our first example will be that we have a hidden node, that A implies B, or A causes B and B causes C. So how we can calculate the value, that if I know C has happened, what is the probability of A? Say for example that A is the cause, that say it is raining and I know the raining probability. Then B is the probability that roads will be waterlogged, and C is the probability that you will arrive late. So your arriving late is not directly dependent on the raining, but if the raining causes waterlogging, then only you will get late. So if it is you say, what is the probability that it is raining given you are coming late? Okay, so we will use the Bayesian inferencing. So what is the probability that it is raining given you are coming late? So P A bar C, we will use the Bayes rule, just the other way around, C A bar A into P A into PC. Now I do not know the probability of C bar A, so I introduce the intermediate variable B here. And if I do that, I have to multiply this by this term PB bar A. So that is the from coming from the product rule. And that is the main reason of this exercise, that you understand that how we tackle hidden variables. And later on, this will be very important for the statistical machine learning part. And like this, and next step what we are doing, we are making this conditional independence assumption that C only depends on B. That means your coming late is only depending on water logging, because if the rain is very mild, it may not create water logging, so you may not be affected. So C bar A comma B is equal to C bar B. So I can eliminate A from there, and this is the importance of Bayesian network, that I need not to calculate the joint probability, that I need not to calculate all instance when it is both raining and water logging and you are coming late. So I can only calculate the probability, that what is the probability that you will come late given water is logged. And then we can find this, put these variables and calculate. We will see more practical example in a few slides later. So here there is another example in which we have two hidden variables, that both B and C. Okay, and when we having this arrow, it's we assume that we know this probability, that probability of B given A and probability of C given A. Now I want to know the probability of A given D. So say here, what we can assume that say if it is raining, water logging may be one cause that you are getting late. The other probability may be that you forgot your umbrella or you forgot your uh, raincoat, and that causes you to change your dress, and that makes you late. So this excuse funny example, but yeah, like that, that we have two variables which may affect the final result. So again, like earlier case, we first use the base rule, that P A bar D equal to P D bar A into P A divided by P D. Now since D does not directly depend on A, so we introduce two variables B and C, and we have to uh, introduce this term B comma C given A into PA divided by PD. Now, since D doesn't directly depend on A, but depend only on B and C, we can remove A from this term, and then the rest part of the equation remains same. And last part is, this is again one conditional independence assumption, that B and C, they are not dependent on each other, rather they are independently dependent on A. So we can again divide, instead of B comma C given A, we can write it P B bar A into P C bar A into PA and PD. And later on, you will see a interesting example of also of this conditional independence assumption, which we'll discuss in while we'll talk about naive Bayes model. So just keep this example in mind when after maybe another 20 minutes we will talk about the naive Bayes model, so which will be very similar. So let us now look at, instead of all this abstract notation, let us look at some more practical examples. So this is another again reiterating that what is the Bayesian networks. So just to remember, so here is one example. This again is conditional independence assertion, that cavity is the cause of both toothache and catch. So if we want to calculate any probability of someone has toothache, what is the probability of having cavity, or what someone has catch, what is the probability on cavity? Weather doesn't make an effect on that. So this is the independent uh, probability assumption. So here is our more interesting example, So I am at work. Neighbor John calls to say my alarm is ringing. So I installed a new burglar alarm. And if when I am at work, if the burglar alarm sounds, so neighbor John can call me that my alarm is ringing. So I have to do something, that it may be a burglar. And but neighbor Mary doesn't call. And sometimes Mary calls but John doesn't call. So it is not always that if the alarm ring that I am sure that John or Mary will call. And another complication is that even if there is a minor earthquake, then also the burglar alarm starts ringing. So here I have these following variables, that the burglary, which is the main problem here. I set up the burglar alarm from that. Earthquake also set up the alarm. Alarm has two values. It's either ringing or not. And then John calls and Mary calls. So next our task is to construct a network through which we can capture this causal relationship. And although there are some way of doing the network, but most of the time we use our domain knowledge and create that topology, which minimizes our the number calculation of the number of variables. Additionally, it we should also capture the causal relationship among these variables. So let us see. So here uh, in the central screen is the alarm, the probability of the whether uh, alarm is ringing or not. And I know there are two causes which can set the alarm off. One is burglary and that is earthquake. So burglary and earthquake are the cause, alarm is the effect. And I know the probability of burglary, which is only 0.1%. I know probability of earthquake, which is 0.2%. Now, since both burglary and earthquake can set the alarm off, I need this CPT or conditional probability table. So it tells that what is the probability that if there is both burglary and earthquake, that the alarm will be ringing. There is 95% probability of that. And if there is a burglary but no earthquake, then there is 94% probability the alarm is ringing. If there is no burglary but minor earthquake, then there is still 29% probability of the alarm is ringing. And if both are false, then still there is 0.1% probability that maybe there is some short circuit or something, the alarm still ringing. Now, what is the probability that John or Mary will call me? So then alarm is causing John or Mary to call me. So alarm is the cause here, and the effect is either John calls me or Mary calls me at my work. So here John seems to be more effective in calling me. So there is 90% probability that if the alarm is ringing, John will call me. So the bottom table, J bar A. And the probability that Mary will call me if the alarm is ringing is 70%. So then uh, what uh, I will be interested to know from this Bayesian network, that if Mary calls me, what is the probability that there is a burglary? So probability of burglary given Mary calls me, or B give bar A. So what I suggest you, I will generally when I teach it in class, I ask student to do it during the class. But here I am now. Let's not ask you to do so, but I suggest you that you try this out at your own. And in the Russell Norvig book, you will find the workout example, so you can see that whether you are getting correct result or not. But if you understand the previous three diagrams, here you can calculate it easily, that it will start like that: p b bar m equal to p m bar b into pb divided by pa. Now you do not know m bar b, so you have to introduce the variable a, and so on. Instead, we look at another example. This is directly copied from Wikipedia, the Bayesian network Wikipedia. And as some of you do not yet have the book, so I am purposefully taking this example from Wikipedia so that you can directly go and read it. So here the problem is still related to weather and uh, associated accessories. So If it rains, then then the grass in a lawn get wet, very common. And if it is a sprinkler is on, then also grass get wet. So both rain and sprinkler, they have an effect. They are cause, and they can make the grass wet, right? But if it rains, it can also affect that whether the gardener will turn on the sprinkler or not. So the probability of raining, say in a particular summer season, is to 20%, and probability of not raining is 80%. And if it is not raining, the gardener has 40% probability that he will turn on the sprinkler, and 60% probability that he will not turn on the sprinkler. And if it is raining is true, then the sprinkler true, that means sprinkler is off. Sorry, the sprinkler is turned on. That probability is only 1%. And if the rain is if it is raining, there is 99% probability that the sprinkler is not be turned on. So the problem comes from there, that if even if it is raining, there is a 1% probability that the gardener will turn on the sprinkler. But if it is not raining, then the sprinkler will be on with 40% probability and not on 60% probability. And since both sprinkler and rain affects the condition of grass, so we need this truth table, or this conditional probability table, that if both sprinkler and rain are off, there is no sprinkler, no rain, there is 0% probability the grass will be wet and the grass will stay dry. So one is for false, grass wet probability. If it is raining, there is 80% probability that grass will be wet. If it is only the sprinkler is on, there is 90% probability the grass will be wet. And if both are on, sprinkler is on and it's also raining, there is 99% probability that grass will be wet. 1% probability that something probably happening that grass is still not wet. Right. So what is the probability of it is raining given the grass is wet? So you on a particular day you got the grass wet. So what is the probability that it is actually rained? So I have to calculate R given G. R given G means what? That I know that G equal to true, grass is wet. I want to know what is the probability R equal to true. So I just write it in the reverse way, like Bayes rule, G given R into PR divided by PG. And here again, grass doesn't only depend on rain. So I have to introduce the other variable S, which is sprinkler. And I have to multiply by S given R into PR and divided by PG. Again, like in the previous case, I know all the values of the numerator. Calculating the denominator is slightly difficult, for which we will use this particular conditional probability or product rule. That probability of G, joint probability of G, S, and R, that means grass is wet, sprinkler is turned on, and it's raining, is given by G given SR into multiplied by probability of S given R into PR. And when we are calculating, we have to sum it for all possible values of S and R. So let us see. So what is the probability R equal to true, that it is raining given grass is wet? So we just write it like this, and we uh, introduce the other variable S here, and we have to sum it for all possible values of true and false, and divided by Pg given T, comma S and R. So in the next slide, as you next equation, what we are doing, that if you see P G given R and S, we have to multiply by P S given R. So here we are multiplying by S given R. So here this term, okay, and P are given R equal to 2, true. So here you may find it a bit complicated, because here we are using a slightly different type of uh, sorry, different type of way of representing which is true or false. So in the previous gene defect example, we used A and tilde A, where tilde A means not A. Here we are using equal to T and equal to F. And the equal to notation, why we are using it, because now we are dealing with Boolean variables. That means each variable has two values, either true or false. But very soon we will talk about discrete variables where the variable has more than two values. So they are this equal to symbol will be more meaningful. So if you are with me, so I am trying to calculate G is true and R equal to true. So in the second equation where my pointer is, I am breaking it up G given T, given S equal to 2, 3 true and R equal to true, multiplied by S equal to true and R equal to true into probability of R equal to true. And we have to sum it for both values of sprinkler, true and false. So that's how these values are coming here. And for the denominator calculation is slightly more difficult, because here we only know the grass equal to true. So we have to multiply for all possible values of S and R. So here you can see in the denominator, the first letter is always T, because I know the grass is wet, but then I have to multiply it for all possible combination of G and S. That means true, 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 false, false, true, and false, false, which turns out to be 35.77%. So I mean, do not feel very confused that if you do not follow this calculation very well. So if you like, we will again come back after the presentation to this page and try to work out this example. But you also try this yourself. And as I told that this is explained in Wikipedia pretty well. So probably after a few turns, you will get used to it. And we will again look back to very similar calculation in a few slides later when we'll talk about this Bayesian inferencing. So these are some virtues of um, or characteristics of the Bayesian network, that for a conditional probability table, as you already see, that if there are two parents, there are 4 rows. If there are k Boolean parents, then there will be 2 to the power k rows. So we try to minimize the number of parents. So if I add many parents, then the whole notion of constructing Bayesian network will be lost. So that's why the domain expert is come into effect, that we have to pinpoint that at each point, that so that we can minimize the number of parents. And with k parents, um, again, these are some of this complexity calculation, that if each variable has no more than k parents, where k is usually pretty low. So in this particular example, this John calls, Mary calls maximum value of k is 2, that for A only has 2 parents. So I have to, the complete network requires order of n into 2 to the power k numbers, while if it is a fully connected network, so I need 2 to the power n numbers, which is pretty big. So that's how we construct Bayesian network. So this is like step-by-step instruction, that how we construct Bayesian networks. And again here, that the main task is to identify the parents of X, or finding or pinpoint the cause of a particular effect, so that we can minimize the number of K. And as K, if K becomes near to N, we lost the uh, benefit of a Bayesian network. Otherwise, if K is less, as K becomes more and more less than N, or N means the total number of variables, we need to calculate less number of variables. So in summary, Bayesian networks provide a natural representation for causally included conditional independence. And it's a compact representation of the joint distribution that we did when we even calculating the joint distribution, as you saw in case of the uh, numerator, that or when we are calculating the denominator, you see that how we can exploit the parents. That means in the grass and sprinkler example, that how we combine all the possible values of the parents. And if we do not have a network, that means again the same thing, that if we have more parents, so we will have more number of conditions. And generally it is easy for domain experts to construct. So from Bayesian network, now one of the probably very important example of or a very important application of Bayesian network is Bayesian inferencing, or statistical machine learning. And here the Bayesian network takes slightly different step. And some of you may know that statistical machine learning is very much studied for speech recognition tasks, and also for the gesture recognition or image processing uh, example, even and also another application of Bayesian inferencing, as I told in the initial part of the lecture, that for developing filters for electronic circuits, for example, Kalman filters and particle filters and so on. And they can also be used to as a prediction system for something like a curve prediction or curve fitting um, example, that where you can predict the values of y from unknown values of x. So let us look into this Bayesian inferencing. So here we will use slightly different data or different term and slight different topology. So remember the example that where the alarm can cause both John or Mary to call. So there were two arrows coming out of A towards John calls and Mary calls. Here you can also look at like that, that here uh, equivalent of alarm is the hypothesis, and then the hypothesis can are causing two artifacts. One is the data or D, which I have already known, and X is the new data which I am presently seeing. Say, for example, let us think about a speech recognition system. Say I am telling intelligent. Now the speech recognition system heard up to Intel, and then it is listening the last phoneme agent. So now they are for multiple factor. It may not listen the acoustic signal accurately, or may not process the accurate acoustic signal accuracy. So given that it has already listened the phoneme in and tele, what is the probability that with this new information it can predict that the actual word spoken was intelligent? Another example, see that as I was telling earlier, and we will look at very soon, that I have a bag of candies. I have picked up three candies and all are sour. What is the probability that the fourth candy that I have picked up but not yet put into my mouth, that it will be either sour or sweet? Okay. So now let us look at these uh, similar way we are using these Bayesian inferencing. So here in Bayesian inferencing, I am not much interested always about knowing the hypothesis. So I am interested to know the, say, what is the probability of the new data, that the last candy that I picked, what is the probability of it being sour or salt? Or say I already tossed a coin 4 times and all 4 times were head. What is the probability that it will also be head on fifth time, given the previous three candies were sour, or the previous four coin tosses give me head? So again, we will use the usual Bayesian logic here. So X is not directly dependent on D. So I cannot directly write D given X. So instead, what I am doing, that I am introducing this variable H here, because H is the intermediate variable. And since I am introducing the variable H, I have to multiply it with H given D. Now P X bar H is already given, and X only depends on H, not directly on D. So this probability I already know. For P H bar D, I will just use the normal Bayes rule. So I will use P D bar H into PH divided by PD. Okay. So let's come out from this example. So again, this example is taken from the Russell Norvig book. And in the Russell Norvig book, you can only see the picture, but not the intermediate calculation. So let's bear with me and see if we can make sense. So there are 5 bags of candies, right? And all these bags are identical. From outside, I cannot identify which bag it is. So the green are the lemon candies, which are sour. Reds are the sweet candies or cherry candies. Now I know that there are 5 types of bag, but I cannot identify which bag it is. So for H1, the first type of bag, it's there is 10% probability that I have a uh, bag of first kind. So the situation is like that I am expecting a bag of candy, and it's a surprise to me. I only know that there is a 10% probability that I will get bag one, which has 100% cherry candies or all red. I know there is 20% probability that it's a second bag, which has 75% cherry candies, 25% lime candies. 40% probability that is the third kind of bag, where both cherry and lime are 50-50. 20% are H4. There is 25% cherry candies, 75% lime candies. A 10% probability is the fifth kind of bag, where are 100% lime candies. Now, these bags are not marked. I just got a bag, and what I am doing something very, very unhygienic, that I am picking up a candy, and from the cover also, it's not evident whether it's a cherry candy or whether it is a lime candy. I am tasting the candy, and then I am repacking it and put it back in the bag. So of course it's very unhygienic, but in a second you will understand that why we have to return the candy in the bag. So the taster is kind of unfortunate. So uh, whatever candy he is picking, all are happen to be lime or sour. So then we are interested into two facts. That one fact is that, say I have picked up two, three candies or a lime. The fourth one I am picking, what is the probability this is lime or cherry? That is the first concern of mine. The second concern is, which bag is it? Is it H1? Is it H2? Is it H3 or 4 or 5? So how we can calculate? So think about the first example. The first candy I picked up from an unknown bag, it is sour. So on the left column, I put the probability of PHI. Here, I stands for the hypothesis or the candy bag, and I has five values because I have five hypotheses or five bag. And this is very important to remember from now on, that what is I and what is J, because I noted many times student confuse between I and J, and why it is so important. You will also understand when you will look at the name phase model in maybe another 10 minutes. So I stands for the number of hypotheses. Here the number of bag. If you are doing a speech recognition case study, then I stands for the number of possible spoken word or number of command words. If you are talking gesture recognition, then I stands for number of possible gesture and so on. What is J? J is the index of the event. So here, what is the event? Picking up candy is the event. If it is speech recognition, the each phoneme that the speech recognition system is listening, that is an event. If it is again gesture recognition, then the particular video frame is an event. Okay, so let us come to this example. Here, picking up one candy is designated by J. I picked up the first candy, it is lime. So first, I know the probability of the five bags, which are 10%, 20%, 40%, 20%, and 10%, which we are written here. So H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. What I am trying to find out, that what is the probability of the next candy being lime, given the first candy being also lime. So I am calculating the probability of D1 given HI, right? So D1 mean the first candy. So the sorry here. So D1 given H1 equal to 0. Why? Because D1 happened to be a lime candy, and the first bag has 0 lime candies. All are cherry candies. The probability of the first candy being lime coming from the second bag is 25%, because the second bag has 25% lime candies. Similarly, the probability of D1 lime given H3 is 50%, and similarly 75% for the last bag. It is 1 because H5 has all lime candies. So it's 0, 0 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1. Now, what is the multiplication of D1 HI into HI? Simple, 0.1 into 0, 0, 0.2 into 0.25, 0.005, 0.4 into 0.5, 0.2, and so on. and we sum up all these values in the third column, which happen to be 0.5. So this is summation d1, uh, summation for all I, probability of d1 given hi. Now, what is the probability of h1 given d1? That what is the probability that the bag is a first kind? That means my second query. So it will be d1 hi, d1 h1 into ph1 divided by the pd, which in the previous slide, this denominator. And remember from this sprinkler example, or previously from this gene defect example, for calculating the denominator, I have to add all possible values of the random variables. That's why I am calculated the zero summation value here. So 0 divided by 0.5 is 0, 0.05 divided by zero point 0.5 is zero point 0.1, 0.2 divided by 0.5 is 0.4, 0.15 divided by zero point 0.5 is 0.3, and so on. So I am dividing this number by this summation, and it is giving me the probability that if the first candy is lime, what is the probability of that bag? And then finally, I am calculating x given hi, that what is the probability of the second candy, which is also going to be lime, and this is same as the first column, okay, or sorry, the second column, that which I am coming from these values, that the zero probability for first, 25% for the second, and so on. And finally, with all these values, I can calculate that what is the probability that the second candy is also going to be lime, given the first candy is lime, is 0.65. So x bar hi multiplied by 0. So 0 into 0, 0, 0.25 into 0.1, 0.025, 0.5 into 0.4, 0.2, and so on. Right. Now, I picked up another candy. So that's what I am writing D21. And again, the person is unfortunate. The second candy is also happened to be lime. So here we are using the product rule, that what is the probability that both candies are lime, given it is coming from a particular bag. And here the reason that why I am adopting this very unhygienic practice, that I am after testing the candy, I am putting it back into the bag, because unless I am putting the candy back into the bag, the probability values will not remain same. Say for example, I have 100 candies, 25 were lime, 75 were cherry. So if I swallow the one candy, then I have only 99 candies, and there will be say 25 cherry and 74 lime. So the probability value will not remain same. That's why I have to put the candy back. And this is again known as a independent event assumption. Again, when we will later look at statistical test, there we will see that most statistical tests also assume this independent event assumption. That means picking up the candies, they are independent event, that it doesn't depend on the previous event. Like for example, if I am tossing a fair coin, each toss is independent of the previous event. So here I am using the product rule and simply multiply these values, 0.25 into 0.25, 0.5 into 0.5, and so on. Then we are multiplying this first column value with the second column value, just like in the previous case, to find out PD21 given H1, and calculating the summation, and then dividing this value by the summation value. And then we are calculating similarly what is the probability of the third candy to be lime, given the first two candies are lime also. So on the right hand side, you can see this chart. This is, you can see in the Rasselnovic book. And in the previous example, you see that unfortunate person is picking up all lime candies. And as he is picking up, you can see here we are plotting all the values of H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. And so we are only plotting the values of the fourth column. Okay, this column, fourth column, not the final value. And here you can see that as I am picking more and more lime candy, the probability of the fifth bag is getting higher and higher. And when I am picked up 10 consecutive candy, which are all lime, or maybe after the third candy, when three consecutive candies are lime, the probability of H5 is highest, or rather, after the fourth candy being lime, the probability of the H5 is highest. That means that it's highly probable that I am got the all lime bag, or H5. And as I am picking more and more lime candy, the probabilities of all the other hypotheses are getting down. and this probability is increasing. So if you think it, use the metaphor for speech recognition, that as I am hearing more and more phonemes, I can zoom in on a particular word, and similar for gesture recognition. And here also you can see that then we can also do it for the third candy, which is a very similar calculation, that 0.25 into 0.25 into 0.25, something like that. And here you can see that as I am picking up more and more lime candy, the bottom graph is showing the probability of what is the probability of the next candy will be lime. As I am picking up more and more lime candy, it is becoming more probable that I am picked up the fifth bag, and so the probability of the next candy being lime is also getting higher and higher, and gradually getting asymptotic with one. Now, interestingly, see from my domain knowledge, if I after the fourth candy, if I already know that the bag is H5 and I know that in H5 all are lime candy, then I really do not need this bottom graph, right? That if I know that it is H5, I already know that all candies are lime. So I do not need to calculate this extra probability. And in a couple of slides later, we'll see that we exactly do this, and we term it as map learning. And earlier also I told that the calculating the denominator is cumbersome, that we need to calculate all possible combinations of variables, and which is not always easy. So uh, but the denominator is same for all calculations, so we can ignore the denominator calculation. Rather, we can only compare the numerator and take a decision that which hypothesis or which word is most probable, and that will serve our purpose. So in going into that, before that, let us look at another slightly more practical example. So this example I picked up from when I taught this course in the National Institute of Fashion Technology probably a couple of years ago. So this is one production uncertainty modeling example. So here what is the issue, that a particular product garment factory, they have they take material from three producers, or they buy same apparel from three production house, which are marked as UAM 01, 02, and 03. And they have the probability that on 60% occasion they took raw material from the first one, 30% cases they take it from the second one, and in 10% cases they take it from the third one. So the last row will be UAM03. So it's written 2 by mistake. Anyway, so and this is the probability of defects. So like just like our previous example, the probability of lime candy. That's what in 2% cases, the first vendor gives defective products. In 3% cases, it gives second vendor gives defective products, and 4% cases the third vendor. And that's why we took only 10% garments from the third vendor, and find the probability of defects that were produced by factory UM3, and design a Bayesian inference model by which we can predict that if we getting a set of defective products, what is the probability that it is coming from a particular vendor. So you can download this Excel sheet from the course website. So here also we use very similar calculation. I have put it here so that you can calculate. So here, like picking up the lime candies, just imagine that I am picking up products and these are turn out to be defective. So on the first column, I am putting the probability of hypothesis. Here we have three factories, and the probabilities are 0 0.6, 0 0.3, 0 0.1. And the probability of defect happened to be 0.02, 0.03, and 0.04 from the previous table. And then very similarly, we are making the calculations like the previous cases and finding the probability of x given d1, that what is the probability that if the first product is defective, what is the probability of the next product to be also defective. And as I am picking up more and more defective products, you can see that probability is increasing towards 4, or getting asymptotic towards 0.04, because it's most probable that the particular products are came from the third vendor who has 4% uh, defective products. And if you look at this fourth column like previous, so initially my probability was prior probability was 60%. Then when I picked up the first defective product, it reduces to 48%, and the probability of the third vendor increased from 10% to 16%. When I picked up second defective product, the probability of the second third vendor increases 24%, and the other one 40%, and the probability of first vendor decrease. And as I am picking up more and more defective products, the supply coming from the first vendor is reducing 0.48, 0.36, 0.25. Rather, the probability of the third vendor is increasing because it's most probable that it is coming from the third vendor. Right. And again, you can work out this example to understand this logic is here. And again, as you see that here, once we get this first two row finalized, or if we can plot these first two rows, then the rest calculation becomes very easy. So that becomes almost methodical, right? And similarly, on the second case, that we are this independent event assumption. So this is, we have to multiply this number by this number. So again, all you need to do is to fill up these first two rows, or you have to calculate probabilities for these 6 probabilities. You only need to calculate the rest probabilities. You can calculate by simple multiplication and summation. So what uh, what is the utility of this method? So sometimes we have many hypotheses. Say, for example, if I am using it for speech recognition, then all possible English word happen to be a hypothesis. So there is one way to tackling it by limiting the number of possible words. For example, when I worked with the Eurofighter Typhoon team back in British Aerospace Systems, so during around 2013-14, I have heard that they have a direct voice input inside the aircraft, which has only 32 command words. That means instead of all possible English words, the speech recognition system only has to recognize one of 32 words. So that is one way. But when we are generating a general purpose, say, voice recognition system like Alexa or Cortana or Siri, whatever, then we cannot make that assumption. But then it's also become difficult to calculate probability of all possible hypotheses. They that we calculate this value, that we calculate the value only for the most probable hypothesis. So in these cases, we have only 3 or 5 hypotheses. But if we have many, say, then we can pick up only the top 3 or the top 10% hypothesis. And we look at maximizing this product. We give an HI into PHI, like this third column, which is actually calculating the probability of the. And sometimes it's difficult to write program for maximizing a product. So then we take the log of it, and the log makes to maximize the summation, which is easier. So we looked at only the most probable hypothesis. And if you in later part of the course, we will look at the information theory. So if you anyway come through this Shannon's theorem and information theory, so the log is the number of bits to encode hypothesis. So that way we can minimize the storage space also, and it becomes easier to implement statistical machine learning techniques. So the last topic today, we'll talk about maybe the penultimate topic. After that, we have the IUI case studies. Is Bayesian classification. So here we already talked about classification. Remember that here I was talking about that I have 3 vendors, and which vendors the probability is maximized. And in the previous example, we have 5 bags, and we are looking at that which bag probability is higher. So you can consider the same notion, that you can, instead of hypothesis, we just name them as classes and try to see that which class has the highest probability. So Bayesian classification exactly do that. Instead of these or product, we talk about features, and features are x1, x2 up to xn, and we try to predict a label y or a class y. So here is an example from digit recognition. So here my features are all possible values of pixel, x1, x2 up to the full resolution of that image. And we want to classify it whether it is 5 or 6. And the base classifier states that using the rule that what is the probability of the digit is 5. For example, I have 10 classes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I have all these possible 2 megapixel number of pixels, and I want to calculate that which digit has the highest probability. So how we can compute that? To that also we can use the Bayes rule and make this assumption. Now the problem is that calculating this joint probability that x1, x2 up to xn given y, it is almost improbable. Why? Because say we are working on a handwriting recognition task, so it's very difficult to know that for all possible way of writing 5, that what is the joint value or what is the uh, picture will look like. So here we can make or in terms of this particular 5 or 6 recognition, that calculating this numerator that for x1 up to xn given y equal to 5 is a bottleneck. So there we make one of these. So these are the problem that we will run out of space and time, because there are very similar logic as the Bayesian network construction case, and we need a lot of training data. So here we make this naive Bayes assumption. And again, if you remember on a very early slide, we were talking about these that if we have two independent causes that A, B, C, D, that I can make this assumption they are independent event. So instead of calculating the joint probability of x1, x2 up to xn given y, we assume that all these pixel value are independent of the each other. So we can product it. So instead of 2 to the power n, we can deal with only n values. And this assumption is known as naive Bayes assumption. Again, like all assumption, it may not be true, but for sake of reducing complexity in calculation, we make this assumption, and this assumption is known as naive Bayes assumption. So we can reduce the number of parameters to be computed from 2 to the power n to n. So with that, we will just look at two quick case studies, very similar to the previous cases. And since this course is on AI for UI UX design, so we look at two case studies of UI UX example using Bayesian inferencing. There are numerous other examples of using Bayesian. Rather, it is a very common predictive technique now used in all intelligent user interfaces. But I picked up one historical example and one example from our own research. So remember in the previous case, I was talking about a car head-up display and trying to operate it with eye gaze tracking and trying to reduce the duration or selection time of eye gaze-based selection. So here we have a similar problem. Here we are assuming that the person is using a existing car dashboard, no head-up display, a normal head-down display on the center stack, and he is pointing to it, and I want to select it before the person is actually physically touch it. Why? Because there are many reasons, like the person is using seat belt and he cannot reach it, or he has to lean forward to touch it. It will take longer duration to actually physically touch it. But if we can predict where he is aiming to touch, we can reduce the selection time and so on. And we are assuming that while the person is trying to touch the interface, so this is called virtual touch, that we also uh, can record his eye gaze. That means we can measure that where the person is looking at. So to be more specific, we can use something like a lip motion tracker to track finger movement, and we can use a eye gaze tracker to track eye gaze movement. And here we used 2D Gaussian distribution, in which, and what is my problem or uncertainty here, that I cannot be certain that which screen element he is pointing at or which screen element he is looking at, because the car is vibrating, etc. So we use two Gaussian distribution, which we assume that will estimate that his likelihood where he is trying to touch, and then we are multiplying these Gaussian distributions to accurately determine that where the person is looking, trying to point at. So here it is how it is looking like here. So you can see it, that we just use it on a driving simulator, and left hand side laptop doesn't have a touch screen, but it is equipped with a leap motion controller and eye gaze tracker. And as she points to it and glances to it, it gets automatically selected. So she needs not to, look longer duration to it. So we're reducing both the glance duration and the physical movement duration. So, very recently, Cambridge University also made a press release on this virtual touch interface, which was I worked on the project only for 1 year, around 2015-16, and they used another type of Bayesian inferencing called particle filter to predict the finger movement and use it to predict that where the person is actually trying to touch. And you may check out the press release later on. Second case study we look at is more like a historical example. So if any of you use the Windows 98 and Microsoft Office 98 or maybe 2000 or XP, you are familiar with this. It's called WARD. So this is a help assistant, and it was developed by the Adaptive System and Interaction Group of Microsoft Research at Redmond. And in the present Microsoft Office, it is not available now, but around 98 2000 it was there in the Microsoft Office. So this project's name is Lumiere, and it was again one example of using Bayesian inferencing to be a automatic help assistant, that anytime you are finding it difficult, so this word will automatically appear and try to show you a fact or try to run a conversation with you and try to help you. And the Bayesian inferencing system looks like that. So uh, here all these nodes like users background, assistance history, competency profile, task history, these are all random variables, and these edges are showing as cause and effect as before. You can see pretty complicated diagram. And then it calculates a utility based on all these conditional values, based on the cost of assistance and users acute needs. Based on this, it calculates the total mathematical expectation, and from that it offer the help. And here you can see that that an agent tracks all the events. That means what you are doing with Office and what you are typing or writing, and from that it try to calculate this random variable and predict that. So I shouldn't say that this was a very successful product, but this is one of the historical or direct example of using Bayesian inferencing for predictive UI or UX development. But in later stages, there are many other examples on content prediction. Later in the next lecture, we will talk about information retrieval and content processing. And then also we can look at some more example of using Bayesian inferencing for prediction. So this happened to be the last slide. So we talked about Bayesian inferencing, Bayesian network, and inferencing using Bayesian network, and through that we introduced statistical machine learning, or we just started the classification example, or how we can use naive-based classifier. And although it's naive, but it is happen to be a most popular classifier. And then we went through case studies in IUI. So with that, I will stop talking and this recording, and then I will be happy to answer your question. So just